How we teach depends on whether it's a private or a group lesson. In group lessons, there's much more of a plan, and you can look at each one of the types of lessons that we teach for more details on those. In private lessons, we'll go at the rate that the student needs us to move at so that it's comfortable without creating fear, but yet being fun for them. We'll discuss any goals. A lot of times they don't have goals, and so it's up to us to decide what to do. However, there are times when there are some very unrealistic goals that parents will want you to teach a 6-year-old how to make parallel turns on black terrain so they can ski with them. And then there's also the motivation issue. Some kids don't want to be taking a lesson or don't want to even be skiing, while other kids are really excited and want to get to the top of the hill as soon as they can. The first thing we'll start to do is evaluate right away, and even if it's a beginning lesson rather than a high-level lesson, you can tell an awful lot about how well a kid's going to be able to do by just how well they can walk and move around initially. People are usually afraid when it's very crowded, and so one thing we can do is try to find the least crowded area. On busy weekends where there's a lot of traveling clubs and public over in the beginner terrain, sometimes we can find a different area, or at least the least crowded conditions we can find over there. But at Pine Knob, right next to the first chairlift, oftentimes on weekend mornings it's very uncrowded over here, and you can actually just have the students walk up diagonally so they don't even have to do any sidestepping, and that's where they can do their first straight run. So they can use their poles to actually walk up the hill, another good reason to be using the poles, and then they'll put the poles downhill to make a gate so that they can step around and get into their good athletic position, and then they're ready to come down and just do their first straight run. And there's not many people around here, so it's usually a much more comfortable, less fearful place to work with them. There's a lot we can do before getting on the lift. We can walk around in circles, and they can do figure eights. This can be with 1 or 2 skis on. We can do boot work, which just means taking off the skis to help them feel and do a variety of exercises. We can do static exercises with skis on. There's many more challenging things such as sidestepping, walking in a herringbone, and skating that are very difficult for many people to do, so we'll try to use those very sparingly, because people could spend several lessons just trying to figure out how to do those basic elements. In private lessons, we'll always do the proper amount for the student. In group lessons, we'll more or less have a set plan to try to keep the lesson moving. When we're going to do a demonstration, we'll want to try to keep our explanation very simple and brief as we're doing it. So if we're going to work on our athletic stance, we'll simply say, let's take our hands, put them out in front like we're holding a tray with our lunch on it, and then just bounce up and down a little bit, and we'll stop before we're all the way to the top. Very simple. And then what we want to do is make sure we build the connection so that people feel their chest is over their toes and they feel like they have the weight up on their toes. It's really more the balls of their feet, but for kids they can usually relate to their toes much easier. Then if you're paying attention, you're able to give feedback right away, and that's the second part of teaching, not just giving the demonstration with a simple explanation, but then making sure that they're doing it and you're able to either provide help or feedback right away as it's happening. The biggest issue in skiing is people wanting to lean back, so getting a good athletic stance established before they get up the hill is very important, because as soon as they go on a slope, they're going to want to lean back. So it's important they have a real simple, clear way of relating their chest over their toes, feeling the weight on their toes, and where their hands are going to be, because it's going to be a real struggle when they take off, and you really have to pay attention to reinforce this good athletic stance once they get up the hill. Whether it's a private, semi-private, or group lesson, once you're sure they can get on the carpet and they have the spacing right, you can go up and take your skis off so that you're ready when they get up to the top. This way you can assist them as they're coming off in case they're having any kind of struggle or problem exiting or walking over or getting their skis pointed downhill. So this way you're there in case they need any kind of help. You can demonstrate for them where their hand should be in getting into that good athletic position. If they can do it, you can give them that positive reinforcement right away as they're going. But if there's some kind of a difficulty where you actually might have to give them more help by positioning their hands, or maybe they can't make a wedge, you'll go down there and help position them. It's very important not to let people take off if they can't make a wedge and they can't get into that good athletic stance. So take the time right now to set them up for success. And also, by being out of your skis and being over here ready to help, they're in a position, or you're in a position, where you're not making them try to walk around and find a spot on a crowded top of the hill where they may be falling and having trouble turning. If you're in skis at this point, it's very hard to help them as they're about to fall. But if you're in your boots, you can be right there to give them a hand. Plus the fact they're not standing there waiting for everybody to come up. They're in motion. You're putting them right back on the hill. They're learning when they're in motion, not standing around waiting for people and not falling down and having to be picked up or get back up before they're trying to take off. In this case, we're looking at a student whose instructor gave the demonstrations and is at the bottom of the hill in their skis. And this person could not figure out their athletic stance, so once they got going, things just got more and more challenging, and it ended up the way it oftentimes does in this situation. Now the student's on the ground, it's no fun for them, and it's very frustrating and not much fun for the instructor when you're having to pick up people who can't get up. So let's set them up right and ensure them success. If they can't get that stance, they can't get the wedge from the top, you're right there to give them some help. Another issue that we'll see often on the Wonder Carpets are instructors trying to go very slow and encouraging their people to try to make their turns, usually in a rather wide wedge, and then having them try to do one big turn across the hill to stop. Their students end up turning their shoulders and leaning into the hill if they can make this happen at all, and it's a real struggle for the students, and it's kind of frustrating for the instructor as they watch and kind of wonder why can't these people turn any better. So again, this is not setting the people up for success when they're on a very flat hill going very slow, and a big wide wedge turning is very difficult under these conditions, so we need to set them up for success. Another thing will be instructors having students take off in a traverse across the hill. So now their momentum is heading across the hill and they're trying to get that first top part of the turn done. And one of the instructions that they'll be given by a lot of instructors is just try to flatten that downhill ski, or in this case it would be the skier's left ski, the one that's closest to the bottom of the hill, and they'll have them try to flatten that ski out so that the skis will start moving downhill. And oftentimes when that happens, the skiers end up leaning downhill and then falling over inside the turn. Again, we want to be in the fall line, working with our momentum and gravity working together in the same direction. When it is time to get over to the rope, to the proper terrain to start working on turns, we want to make sure that we focus on the details when we're loading the rope, getting nice and close to the rope before we grab it, making sure both skis are pointing uphill, letting the rope run through our hands and slowly squeezing it If they're having difficulties, you can adjust anything that needs adjusting, show them how to slowly grab the rope, and then you're still there if they're afraid or having problems, so that you can either give them a push, or if they're grabbing too fast, you can hold them over. If they want to lean on the rope or sit down, you're right there to give them assistance, and then they're ready to take off. And if it's a group situation where your partner's on top, they will give a hand. If it's not a group situation, it's a private or a semi, and you're there by yourself and you're worried about how well they're going to exit, just have them go a very short distance. Now that it looks like they're going, say, okay, let's let go of the rope and stop. Then that way you're just a couple steps away to give them a hand their first time as they're coming off. If you're the person working on top, exiting the rope, you want to make sure that you don't reach out, especially if the student reaches out a hand and wants some help, and you're going to grab their arm and try to get them off. That will only put them in a difficult balancing position. You don't want to do that. So what you want to do is have them get off the rope above you so that you're behind them, and then right away you can put a hand behind their hips, and then if they're still having trouble turning, you can take both hands, help turn them around, and even get turned so that their skis are pointing downhill. Show them where their hands go, their good athletic position. If there's any problems there, you can go set them up in the wedge in their good athletic stance, and they're all set to go. If the students are not set up in an athletic stance in a wedge heading straight down the hill, if they're heading across the hill out of balance, they've just wasted a run. So it's very important that we get everything set up, and this is a key towards success right here. We have slowed down this first rope at Pine Knobs, so if you've had problems in the past, much easier to use now, and many instructors who have not liked using the rope are finding it's easier. But also, if you have not been using these really basic elements of how to work the ropes properly that first time or two up, you've made using the rope very difficult, and that's why using the rope is not much fun for some instructors or students, because you could be doing it much more effectively. Now we're ready to try to find this area of proper terrain so that we can really develop some good turning with them. And of course we can do a lot of things over here before adding any kind of terrain. We can work on different ways to turn. We can have them point their toes one way back at the lodge, then the other way, or we can have them push on one toe and then the other toe, and we can have them do combinations of that, so they turn and push or push and turn. And then try big turns and little turns, specific numbers. Give me 3 little turns and 3 big turns. So right there we have 6 exercises that we can do, or 6 different points to focus on before we go any higher on the hill. It's important to take the time in the right terrain, and many people are trying to rush up the hill before they're really developing any abilities in the student. The other thing you can do is go ahead and work exercises in this lower terrain area. And so if you're going to do an exercise, in this case we'll have them try touching their hand to their knee as they're pushing on the toe. We'll have them practice that statically here, so that they'll take their hand, touch it to their knee as they're pressing down on their toe. So you can think push and touch, push and touch. They practice it statically. You make sure that they're doing it, and then they can do it. But as they take off again, you're always saying, give me that good athletic stance and give me some speed before we try to do it. This is the prerequisite. If they cannot get into an athletic stance and get some speed going, anything you try to do in terms of different ways to turn or exercises will be very difficult. So you have to make sure that you're there getting these prerequisites right before you can play around with different ways to turn in exercises. So there's the hand to the knee as they're pushing on the toe. So push and touch, push and touch. You want to be actually able to see your students starting to look like they're getting close to an athletic stance and starting to ski using their feet, whether they're turning their feet or they're pushing on their toes, before we try to go at all any higher up the hill. And even if they're struggling to get to the level where this student is at, we can go ahead and spend more time here doing exercises before we start moving higher. An exercise that we might do with them is just putting their hand down on their leg by their pocket and just imagining that they're sliding their hand down towards their knee as they're pushing on their toe. So they're thinking slide and push, slide and push to make the turn, and then they'll stand up and they'll try it on the other side. This exercise can be used at intermediate and advanced levels. They can focus on either flexing their ankle as they are sliding their hand down, or they can think pushing on their toe as they're sliding their hand down. But as you see, this is the fundamental drill for developing tipping or angulation and ankle flex. So this can be used in uphill Christies at upper levels, and it can also be used when linking turns at uphill levels to try to keep that progressive tipping and ankle flex. And you can have kids maybe count 1, 2, 3 as they're doing it. Kids can sometimes imagine that they have their hand in their pocket and they're trying to dig way down to the bottom of a deep pocket. 1, 2, 3, reach down as you're pushing on the toe. They can also, again, starting off in their good athletic stance and building their speed, they can just try bouncing on one toe, bounce, bounce, bounce to go through a turn, and then stand up and try the other toe. So now it's the right toe, stand up, left toe, bounce, bounce, bounce on the left, stand up, bounce, bounce, bounce on the right, stand up, bounce, bounce, bounce on the left. Very shallow little turns, just a quick little bounce, bounce, bounce on the toe. They can go ahead, again, good athletic stance, and getting some speed build up with their little narrow wedge, and this time it's just going to be a rapid push, right toe, left toe, right toe, left toe. So be right toe, left toe, right toe, left toe to make these quick little turns. Sometimes just changing the pace of the movements makes a big difference in terms of whether or not they can start to make their turns. So again, this is an exercise that can be used at intermediate and advanced levels on steeper terrain, narrow wedges, harder pushes, even all the way up to the black patch level where they'll really develop some real quick little turns back and forth. So our goal is to really make sure that we are presenting a nice array of clear goals, that good stance, the speed, a bunch of different little exercises and ways to turn, so that we're moving at the proper pace on the proper terrain, and then we're able to give them specific feedback rather than getting people too high too fast. These are students that are up near the top of a rope toe and are struggling to make turns in this lesson that they happen to be in. And we can see that either A, they never found the way to properly stand on their skis, or they had it and they just got too high too fast. This is happening a lot in our lessons where instructors are up high with people that are really back on their skis, many times coming off the first chairlift or way too high on the rope toe, and then they're struggling to try to help these people turn, and oftentimes leaving them in lessons way back here on their tail of their skis, barely able to turn. So the thing we want to do is stay in the proper terrain, give people some clear goals and some clear feedback so that we can actually start to make that difficult transition from being on the back of the ski to being in the proper place on their skis, so that at the end of the lesson we've actually taught them like an instructor that was worth our $80 an hour or however much they paid for their lesson, and not just teaching them the way their friends or family would. We'll actually go ahead and teach them at the proper pace.